Welcome back, everyone. I'm Sandy Rosenthal, your host of Beat the Big Guys. And today, my guest is from the great state of California, more specifically San Francisco, and his name is Kevin F. Adler. Hey, Kevin.
Hey, it's good to be with you, Sandy. Thanks for having me.
You're so very, very welcome. I'm really delighted because you're going to be talking about something today that most of us see every single day and don't really know what to do about it. And so hopefully after this discussion, we'll all come away feeling a little bit more empowered. So without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and give everyone a short introduction of who you are and let you take it away. Okay? Kevin F. Adler is a social entrepreneur, author, and founder of Miracle Messages, a nonprofit headquartered in San Francisco. The goal: to help people experiencing homelessness across the U.S. rebuild their social support systems and financial security. This is done through family reunifications, a phone buddy system, and the first basic income pilot for unhoused individuals in the U.S., backed by Google Org as part of a $2 million randomized control trial. Kevin is also the author of the newly released book, When We Walk By, which publishes weekly, called a must-read for anyone interested in solving the problem of homelessness. So I am really looking forward to hearing what you have to say and to our discussion afterwards. And so at this point, Kevin, please go ahead, take it away.
Great. Well, yeah, thanks for having me, Sandy. Hi, everyone. It's good to be in a community of change makers, innovators, and do-gooders, my kind of people. So, I'll share a little bit of background because 10 years ago, if you had told me I'd be on a podcast like this talking about homelessness, let alone having written a book on homelessness, I would have said you're out of your mind. I didn't know a thing about homelessness. But what I knew is that I had a wonderful uncle who I loved very, very much, who was the guest of honor at Thanksgiving and Christmas, anytime he'd visit, who also lived on the streets for 30 years. And I never thought of Uncle Mark as a homeless man because he was just a beloved member of my family. And so it wasn't until after Uncle Mark passed away at the age of 50, he was found deceased in a transitional housing unit, that I just started thinking, gosh, everyone I'm walking by, that's someone's son or daughter, someone's brother or sister, or maybe some kid's beloved uncle or aunt. And at that time in my life, I realized I didn't really see people experiencing homelessness as people like my Uncle Mark. I saw them as problems to be solved, not people to be loved. And so my starting point in this work was over the course of a year, I wanted to get to know my unhoused neighbors as neighbors. And the way I did that was a little unconventional. I invited 24 individuals experiencing homelessness to volunteer to wear GoPro cameras around their chests and narrate their experience of what life is like on the streets. And I got dozens of hours of footage back. It was heartbreaking, hearing people really suffering in a traumatized state, and most of the time just totally ignored by passersby. And in one of the clips, Sandy, I heard something that changed my life and set me on this course. And I love how these little insights, sometimes these little nuggets of truth, can really lay the seed to something much greater in our lives and in our work. And I'm sure that's true for some of your listeners. And what I heard was a simple statement, and it went something like this: I never realized I was homeless when I lost my housing, only when I lost my family and friends. I never realized I was homeless when I lost my housing, only when I lost my family and friends. That made sense to me at a very intuitive level. There was something resonant about that. But I had never heard any homeless service providers, government agencies articulate this part of homelessness, what I've come to call relational poverty as a form of poverty. Isolation, loneliness, disconnectedness, often a stigma and shame that accompanies it. So, not knowing what I didn't know, I thought, well, maybe I could just walk down the street, go up to everyone I see who's visibly homeless, and ask a very simple question. Do you have any loved ones you'd like to reconnect to? And maybe some will say yes. So, December 2014, walked down Market Street, downtown San Francisco, and just went up to everyone. I think I had some tea, maybe some biscuits, maybe a few pairs of socks. And I just walked around introducing myself and saying, do you have any loved ones you'd like to reconnect to? And it just turned out that one of the first individuals I met was a man named Jeffrey. He said he hadn't seen his family in 22 years. So I sat down with him and I said, Jeffrey, would you like to record a video message to your loved ones? And he said, yes, I would. So I pulled out my smartphone, hit record, and he recorded this really poignant 1 minute video to his niece, his nephew, his sister, and his dad. So I get this video, go home, and I kind of sit on it for a few days. I'm not sure what to do with it, but I felt like I need to really try to do something. So I get on social media, on Facebook, and I do a search for the town that he gave me some information about where he was from. So I looked up the town, and it had a Facebook group connected to his hometown. You're from blank if dot 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 kind of a Facebook group. So I got on there, posted the video with a short note, and within 1 hour, it was shared hundreds of times. It made the local news that night as the leading story. Classmates started commenting and said, hey, I went to high school with Jeffrey. I work in construction. Does he need a job? I work at the congressman's office. Does he need health care? And in the first 20 minutes of the post, his sister got tagged. We got on the phone the next day, and she told me that Jeffrey had been a missing person for 12 years. Broad daylight, downtown San Francisco, a few days before Christmas. So, Sandy, that was my starting point. That's what became the first miracle message. And fast forward to today, it's not just me wandering around the streets with a smartphone and blasting things on social media. Miracle Messages, we're a nonprofit organization headquartered in the Bay Area, but offering our services nationwide and with volunteers around the world. And we do 3, maybe 4 things, very simple. And I'll share what each of those are. And then I'll share a little bit about the book and then dive into the conversation.
Okay.
So first program that we offer is our Family and Friends Reunification Services. This is really what started with Jeffrey, but it's evolved a lot since then. So the family and friend reunification is a person who is disconnected from their loved ones who's experiencing homelessness can record a video message, audio message, fill out our online form, have a caseworker or social worker, outreach worker refer them to us either through our website or we have a hotline. The phone number is very easy. It's 1-800-MISS-YOU. And then we've mobilized a network of volunteer digital detectives, everyday people all around the United States who make phone calls, write letters, do digital searches to locate the loved ones, deliver the messages, help reunite families. So those efforts have led to over 800 family and friend reunifications since we started. Thanks. And it also works in the other direction. So we have families that reach out to us saying, hey, my brother Bill, my sister Sally, they are missing and I think they're homeless somewhere in Los Angeles or somewhere in New York. Can you help me find them? And that's where it's a needle in a haystack. It's a missing person search, but we've done over 100 of those reunifications as well. And then, through the reunifications and through listening to the people that we serve, we heard over and over again, people say, this idea of relational poverty as a form of poverty, that's true for me. I have no one. I'm isolated. I'm disconnected. But for me, family is part of the problem, not part of the solution. So how are you going to help me? What are you going to do for me? And that's what led to our second program, which is our Phone Buddy program, where during the pandemic, we created a partnership with the shelter-in-place hotels in San Francisco initially, where we matched, initially it was 80 people in the shelter-in-place hotels who were isolated, had 4 walls and a roof over their head, but not much of a feeling of home. they're getting their meals, they have a roof, but they're isolated, they have no one to talk to. It was a period of time that we all felt loneliness and isolation. And as one unhoused individual said in the early months of the pandemic, you don't need to teach me about social isolation. That's my life already, or social distancing. So we created a phone buddy program where we match volunteers all around the world for 30 minutes a week of phone calls, text messages, one-to-one, kind of like a Big Brothers, Big Sisters program for our unhoused neighbors. We do weekly support calls, trainings. We partner with Dialpad, Google Voice, so you can use a phone number that's not your device phone number to send the text, and the phone number, make the calls if you prefer. And then we have a call log if there's any issues. You can flag it for caseworkers, social workers, or staff members. So right now we have about 350 active phone buddy pairs, and we have volunteers in the Middle East, South America, Europe, Asia, North America, South America, so all over the world. And it's a wonderful program. And from that program, it led to our third program, which is we heard from our volunteers, hey, you've put me in this friendship, and we call it, you've asked us to say we're equal footing, we're neighbors, we're friends. But it's very hard to be on equal footing when my friend doesn't know what they're going to eat tonight, or where they're going to get gas for their car to get back to work on Monday, because 45% of our unhoused neighbors have jobs and work, and another 40% are disabled and can't work. So how do we help them? And so that is what led us to, initially, we raised about $50,000. We invited the volunteers to nominate their friends in the Phone Buddy program. And we gave out $500 a month for 6 months, no strings attached, to 14 individuals in our Phone Buddy program. And within 6 months, 2/3 of those unhoused individuals were able to secure housing. They used the money better than we could have used it for them.
Wow.
And so we have now expanded the program that we call Miracle Money, building off our Phone Buddy program, Miracle Friends, Miracle Money, where we're now giving out over $2 million. We've raised from Google.org, other philanthropists, as part of a randomized controlled trial with USC, assessing the impact of what turned out to be the first basic income pilot for people experiencing homelessness in the United States, along with social support, and doing a study on that. And we're given $750 a month for 12 months in that program that now has full enrollment, and then we're following how it goes. And the final program of Miracle Messages, and which leads into the book, is really is around storytelling, hearts and minds, changing the narrative on this issue. I started out by sharing how when I started this work, I saw people experiencing homelessness not as people to be loved, but as problems to be solved. And what we're trying to do through social media, developing longer form content, and my book is to give people a sense of that our unhoused neighbors are our neighbors, and just as importantly, how everyday people can get involved in this issue. So the book that I wrote came out just a few months ago. It's called When We Walk By. And I'm very excited to talk about that book today with you and dive in. So there it is.
Thank you so much. I have read a good bit of the book. I haven't had a chance to finish it yet, but I will, and I promise you I'll write a great review on Amazon for you.
Thanks, Sandy.
And
Appreciate
give
that.
you those and give you
It makes a difference. Amazon and Goodreads are the two of the big ones. So
yeah, and for all of you listeners out there, you have no idea how important those stars are. They really are important, and it takes a few seconds of your time to do it. So please go ahead and
Sandy,
do
you
that.
get it. You get it from your work. Yeah.
Well, I actually did publish a book, so I do
Yeah,
get it. And the good news, Kevin, is people don't mind being asked.
it's
They,
true.
they'll
Gotta ask.
usually say thank you for reminding me. I just need to do that.
And welcome any and all honest reviews, and it does make a difference. So
It does. So Kevin, I have so many questions because I did read a good bit of your book. So I'm really interested. I sat up and took note when you described a situation where there was a professor I think, believe you, in a class, and a professor asked everyone, raise your hand if you know a homeless person, and no hands went up. I mean, this is so unusual to actually know a homeless person, or a person experiencing homelessness, or temporary homelessness. But then the next question is, do we care? Well, of course we care. And so there's obviously this big disconnect. We care, but we don't really know them. Which, except I actually am one of the few people that a homeless person actually became my responsibility. A homeless man, for whatever reason, decided to reside on my property. The organization Levees.org has a museum, and this property has water, and it has cover. And a homeless person decided during the heat of the summer that this would be a great place to hang out. And I suddenly, this person in need was my responsibility. And I'll be honest, I had no idea what to do. I had no idea what to do. Fortunately, and it's not that I didn't care. I just didn't know what to do. And fortunately, there's an organization in New Orleans called Unity, and it's their mission to reduce the number of homeless people. And they were very, very helpful. And they sent out social workers. It turned up they knew the individual, and suddenly it wasn't my responsibility. This gentleman wasn't my responsibility. But the memory is deep, deep. How helpless I felt. I felt absolutely, totally, 100% helpless. And which is why I'm really interested in hearing from you, and I'm going to read it in the book, is how do I get out of this feeling of helplessness? Do you have any comments on that, this helplessness that I felt? Do you want to comment on that?
Well, the main thing is what you just have done exemplary is just articulating it. I think a lot of people, it's we turn from helplessness into anger and frustration very quickly, or even apathy. Oh, there's nothing we can do. It is what it is. This is the world we live in. It's the status quo. And then that's where we get into unhelpful narratives that, well, maybe a person's deservedly poor. They didn't work hard enough. They made bad decisions. They're all lazy, crazy, addicts, rejects, right? And it's easier for our humanity and our empathy if we adopt, well, they're deservedly poor, there must be a reason, instead of just actually acknowledging what it is, which is, this is incredibly painful. I feel very helpless and frustrated by this. I don't know what to do. How do I get involved? And the good news is, full candor, Sandy, 10 years ago to now, when I started this journey to now, I feel more hopeful, more empowered. There's so much we can do as everyday people. And it really begins with what you're talking about, Sandy, which is getting to know our unhoused neighbors as neighbors. I think the key thing is, we all care about this issue of homelessness. Very few of us have taken the time, as you have, to get to know an unhoused neighbor as a neighbor. And I think it's going to be important. Brian Stevenson, who is someone I'm inspired by, who I think is in your neck of the woods in the South. He talks about this concept of getting proximate, the importance of proximity, getting close enough to the people that we want to help so we hear their stories. And I agree with Brian Stevenson. I actually think we have to go further into getting relational. If I didn't have a personal connection through my uncle, I would have never formed the additional personal ties that I've made. I've met people over the years who went to the same high school that I've gone to, who have gone to worked at companies that I'm familiar with, who live in the area as long as I've lived in the area. So it's already to start with the fact that our unhoused neighbors, by and large, were once our housed neighbors. It's very few people are moving to a community to be homeless in that community. In California, where I'm based, About 90% of the people who are homeless in California were once housed in California. And if you look county by county, it's about 75% of the people who are homeless in a county were once housed in that county. So I would just say this is our communities. We can choose how to get involved. It can be as a phone buddy, volunteering remotely and getting matched with an unhoused friend. It could be, showing up at a shelter, a soup kitchen, and handing out meals is great. Handing out socks is great, but sitting down and having a meal, breaking bread together, that can be even better and more transformative. And you may not transform someone's life on your first conversation, but the life that I find that gets transformed the most is really our own when we do that. So,
Kevin, you mentioned a couple of statistics that blew my mind a little. You mentioned there are statistics that are false, and so what I'm talking about is if someone were to go around asking the general population, why do you think people are homeless? Turns out that 85% of respondents believe that our homeless neighbors, I'm learning, Kevin, right? Our homeless neighbors are homeless because of drugs and alcohol. And 67, a whopping two-thirds, believe that our neighbors are homeless because of mental illness. So, so you point out in your book that these figures are wrong.
yeah.
So what, how, I haven't reached a point in the book. So what is, and you may not have the exact numbers, but what is the truth?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly, substance abuse, severe untreated mental health illness are major issues for our unhoused neighbors. I mean, they're major issues across the country. We have an opioid epidemic.
Right.
We have a mental health crisis. We don't have nearly enough, treatment, therapy, support, conversation around that. But I mean, we can see it every day on the streets. It's a couple things that I think are important to point out. The portion of people who are experiencing homelessness that we see are one facet of a much, much wider pool of people who are experiencing homelessness, many of whom we don't see, are invisible to our eyes. Many children, many single mothers, mothers with children, unaccompanied youth. So we're not seeing, and we're also not seeing the vast number of people in this country, 1 out of every 2 Americans, who are one paycheck away from not being able to pay rent. And 47% of people who say they don't know where they'd get $400 for an unexpected emergency. So I think, there's a kind of confirmation bias at play where we see a facet of homelessness and then we assume that's we attribute that facet to the entirety and why people became homeless. And that's another piece of this, which is, substance abuse, mental health issues, untreated can certainly cause homelessness in some cases, and do, but there's much more of an effect happening than a cause. So what I mean by that is homelessness is incredibly traumatizing and otherizing and painful. I can't imagine, but being out in the elements, in a shelter, in an unsafe environment, if you're a woman, the likelihood of having some kind of sexual assault is 95+%. Like it's staggering. So there's a self-medication that happens, right? Because it's just so painful. And drugs are present on the streets, and we need to deal with way too much permissiveness around drug dealing and people buying and selling drugs. But addiction is a disease, right? It's not
Right,
a character
right,
flaw. It's a
right.
disease. It affects the brain. And then in terms of the actual causes, we have to look much more at the lack of affordable housing. There's a nationwide shortage of over 7 million affordable housing units to meet current demand. We have to look at wage stagnation and income inequality. There's over 3,000 counties in the United States, and there's not a single county where a hardworking person who is working full-time at the federal minimum wage can afford a two-bedroom apartment. And there's only less than 1% of counties where that same hardworking individual could afford a one-bedroom apartment at the fair market value of those apartments. So people can't afford, they're priced out of housing. And I talk about in the book, and I think one of the lenses that I offer and we offer at Miracle Messages that's unique is this angle of relational poverty. The fact that half of the country is a paycheck away from not being able to pay rent, it's actually surprising that half the country isn't experiencing homelessness. Like
Yeah.
what's making up the difference? And what we're finding is family, friends, community, church, synagogue, mosque, informal economy, relationships can be the difference. So if you
Oh,
don't
yes.
have that, and if you've lost that, if you've had arguments or falling outs or divorce or separation or domestic violence, or you're getting kicked out of your house, it can be that much more difficult to get stably housed and stay housed.
It was family and volunteers that got the people of New Orleans through that levee breach failure event that happened during Katrina. It was family and volunteers.
I believe it. I
Got us
mean,
through that. Oh,
going
yeah.
back to early 1800s, Alexis de Tocqueville and Democracy in America, a famous quote from the book is Americans, wherever they are, whatever they're doing, are forever forming associations. If
That's true.
a church needs to be built, if a playground needs to be erected, they come together and they figure it out on how to do it together. And that to me is part of our character and our identity. And I think we need to embrace that at a much wider scale because that's what's keeping so many millions of people from falling over to the edge into homelessness right now, is that social support.
I really like the way you talk about instead of him saying homelessness, you refer to our neighbors experiencing homeless. I'm going to start doing that myself because there are some people that begging for money at street signs within walking distance of my home, and
Mm.
there's no reason I shouldn't consider them a neighbor. So I'm going to start doing that
Well,
myself.
thanks, Sandy. That's a great insight. And I
Got a
think,
convert. So, but
yeah, well, it's I mean the neuroscience on this is pretty damning. And when I saw that, it was eye-opening. There was research out of some professors at the time. I think they were Princeton and Duke, and they did research on the medial prefrontal cortex, which is the part of our brain that activates when we see a person compared to, say, an inanimate object.
right.
And that part of the brain was found in this study to not activate when we see someone that we perceive to be in an outgroup, extreme outgroup in our society, including people experiencing homelessness.
Wow. I
And the
believe
parts,
it.
the
I believe
parts of our brains that did
Yeah, I mean,
activate
I
were
know you're
like,
right. It's just not surprising to me
it's
is what I mean.
totally, yeah. So I think it just takes some reconditioning to say we got to get past this monolith of the homeless because we never call ourselves the house. It just otherizes further. So we try to use person first language, people experiencing homelessness, our neighbors. So
And I'm gonna get you back to that, but I have a dilemma that I have to ask you about. I have a dilemma. I was told by a colleague of mine who are you familiar with the term bleeding heart?
yes.
So it's someone who it's a derogatory term for somebody who's too liberal, and too soft-hearted. And this is a colleague of mine who's also very smart. And he told me a few years ago not to give cash to homeless people on street corners at stoplights. He told me that prevented them from getting the resources that they needed. And I believed him, and I had stopped giving cash to our homeless neighbors after he told me that. So now, after reading your book, I'm back questioning that again.
Yeah,
I
that's a
wonder
great
what you would say
question.
to that.
Let's talk about it. Well, first,
Yes.
one thing that I hope is not felt by reading my book is any sense of guilt.
Of
There's
what?
enough guilt.
Guilt.
There's enough feelings of feeling guilty on this issue. Oh, we're not doing enough. Are we doing it right? It's hard. Like I really want all of us to give ourselves some grace on this issue. It's really complicated. So what I'd
Even
say to your
California couldn't figure it out, but,
yeah,
but we'll get back
well,
to that.
we sure will. So what I'd say, with all due respect to your friend, so he's put forward this framework, kind of this, I think it's often, usually I've heard bleeding heart liberal. It's kind of the full term, like bleeding heart, right? I actually will flip that and say, well, there's another form of uh, liberalism that can be just as pernicious, doesn't get talked about as much, and I'd call that progressive paternalism, where we assume we know better than what our unhoused neighbors need and what other people need than what they do. So I guess the question I'd ask yourself and your friend is, what is the fear? Is how do you think they will spend the money? And if you look at the data, there's a study in San Francisco, surveyed panhandlers, people asking for charity. And I believe, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but it was something like 85% of people who receive some kind of charity on the street use some portion of it for food. And then I think maybe in that survey, somewhere around 40–45% use some portion of it on some kind of substances. So having that information to me, I leave it to the individual to decide. I will kind of assess it on a case-by-case basis. Not that I can make that determination, but determining the conversation. Do we have any interaction? But I think in general, giving dollars here and there, it's not going to save someone's life, and it's probably also not going to ruin their life.
Okay.
I do think programs like what we're doing at Miracle Messages and what others have done around basic income, where instead of just a few dollars here and there, it's hundreds of dollars, if not $1,000 or so, that can really move the needle for individuals. And in that same survey of panhandlers in San Francisco, I think it was about 97% of individuals said that if they were offered housing, they would take it. So it's not like they're choosing to, live a lifestyle on the streets asking for charity. That's no lifestyle. And I think 90 something, 95% of those individuals who were surveyed live in San Francisco. So again, it's not like driving into an area asking for money. So, there are neighbors. Some of them may have substance abuse issues. Most of them will spend the money on food from the research that I've seen. And it probably isn't going to make or break the situation. But I also, I have asked myself, like, what, I don't know if I need to be the one to make that assessment. If I feel
Okay.
like giving money, then I can give the money, and the person can do with it as they wish. But I do think programs like basic income that are a little more structured can make even more of a difference.
So I guess to answer your question, I stopped giving. I used to keep money in my car just for that reason. And I'd stop because I thought I was harming them. I thought I was doing harm. That's the impression I came away with. And it sounds to me like your answer is no, I won't be doing any harm, and more likely doing a little good.
The thing I love about what you just said, Sandy, is such a helpful image of keeping a little cash in the car. And what I would say is, if you want to keep a little bit of cash, keep a little bit of cash. If you want to keep socks, keep socks. #1 requested physical item on the streets. If you want to keep hygiene kits, keep that. If you want to keep, we have hotline cards at our website, miraclemessages.org. 1-800-MISS-YOU is our hotline. You can hand those out. If you want to keep granola bars, water bottles, whatever you do, it's not what you keep, it's you keep something.
Okay.
And because it's the interaction and the chance to engage. And again, it's kind of a means to an end. So you could give money, you could give socks, but also, is the purpose just giving the item? Maybe, but there might be an opportunity just to, smile, ask someone their name, how their day's going, what their plans are for tomorrow, and maybe get to know an unhoused neighbor. So it's a means to an end as much as an end in itself.
Thank you very much. I feel better already. And I'm going to go
I
back to
love it, but your idea of a little something in your car is such a great imagery for all of us to use, and whatever that is, I think that's for me, I actually prefer socks. So I keep a bunch of socks in my backpack, hand those out. I have some granola bars. I'll sometimes have dollar bills, but yeah, I'll leave it
socks.
to.
Did I hear you right? Socks is the #1 asked for or wished for item.
Yeah,
They
because
would appreciate
imagine,
an
like,
item.
I mean, gosh, you're out in the if you're unsheltered, individual, chronically homeless, and you're in the elements and it's raining and you're on your feet all day and you can't really take off your shoes at night because you don't want them to get stolen. And then you have these socks that are on and you're on your feet, you can get some really awful sores and just horrible funguses and issues. And it can inhibit your ability to even get around even easier. So having clean socks, we partner with Bombas. We have 10,000 pairs of antimicrobial socks that are designed for people experiencing homelessness to be worn multiple times in the
Name of that
elements.
company, please.
It's called Bombas. They do kind of a buy one, give one for socks. So we get free socks from them.
Okay, I'm making a note of
And
that.
any organization that serves people experiencing homelessness can go to their website and request some donation socks, and they'll distribute them once a year to you, and you can have a few boxes of donation socks to give out.
Great. Well, I think that covers what my final question was. How and this is probably a good place to let everyone know that Kevin has a vision, and his vision is for homelessness to be rare and brief, for homeless people to be not alone. And I'm paraphrasing, of course, this isn't Kevin's word. And the third, he wants people like you and me and the rest of us to not feel helpless. And so my question was going to be, how do I not feel helpless? And we've already given me one piece of ammunition, is keeping something in my car or my backpack, um, whatever it is, Nutri-Grain bars, socks, whatever it is, but just keep something. And what you said, ask a question, how you doing? What's your name? I do want to add this. Every time back when I was giving out $2, $1 here and there, I would always get a very eloquent and good English answer. Always. Thank you very kindly. You have a nice day. Always. Which
Yeah,
I
and
thought
I
was
think that
something.
that's probably the norm for me as well. And I'd also say on the occasions that you won't get that, because there's times where you won't get that, don't take it personally, right? Like the person may be having a really rough day. You don't know what's going on. So, I think in acts of charity, we shouldn't expect the person receiving the charity to respond in a way that then justifies us making the act. The act should be an act in and of itself. It's charity.
I admit it's always surprising, continues to be surprising, the richness and the eloquence and the politeness of the response. Whereas I normally I'm not expecting to hear anything really. It
Well, it's
continues
it's
to
such a
surprise.
it's such an important point as we even close to reflect on. So I wrote in the book, and if you're getting towards the end, you'll see this in one of the final chapters where I talk about in times of disaster and crisis, how we almost know how to respond to our fellow neighbors who are affected. And I wrote about the 1906 earthquake and fire in San Francisco, a time where out of a population at the time of 400,000, 250,000 people experienced homelessness, were displaced. But I could have easily have just written about New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina. I had a chance while I was in college to lead an alternative spring break group. I created this alternative spring break club called Cancun Can Wait. That's my fun naming convention there. And we took a trip to New Orleans. I think it was May of the year after Hurricane Katrina, so about 6 months after. I think it was the end of August when it happened. And it was heartbreaking. We were in the upper Ninth Ward doing volunteer outreach. We were talking to neighbors who were affected by the flood, by the levee breach, by just the response, everything that happened. And I think as human beings, we almost know instinctively how to respond person to person, community level in times of crisis. We would never look at someone who's affected by a floodwater or a hurricane and say, well, gosh, maybe should have evacuated earlier. That was really dumb. Or, oh, you didn't get the flood insurance that you should have got. Or why did you buy a house there? Why did you rent there? That was silly. No, we respond with tremendous compassion, thinking, gosh, but for the grace of God go I. And we want to help. And so I think homelessness in some ways should be better understood as a type of invisible disaster where we may not see all the causes that led to the person being on the streets or in a shelter. We don't see the relational brokenness. We don't see the economic dislocation, the job loss, the health issue, the abuse, the severe mental health issue or drug issue, or getting out of prison and having nowhere to go. We don't see the system, the systemic force at play, but we see the survivor. But we don't look at them as survivors from a familiar war or disaster. We look at them as, well, what did you do wrong? Individual merits and deservedness. So
Kevin,
I
you
think,
point out in your book that almost 2% of the U.S. population can be determined homeless. Percent.
on any given year, we estimate that as many as 6 million people or more experience homelessness at some point over the course of the year. So yeah, a population of over 300 million, we're approaching 2%, will experience homelessness, and half the country is one paycheck away. So I think this isn't an us versus them issue. This isn't a question of, did you make a mistake as a human? We all make mistakes as humans and make bad choices. This is really a question about who we are as people, the systems that are not working for most of us, not just a few of us, and how we respond as neighbors.
And as your book points out, much of the homelessness, many of our homeless neighbors, we can't see them. And so so thank you. Your book helps us see them. And that's important as well. So Kevin, we're about run out of time. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we sign off?
Really enjoyed chatting with you. Would invite folks to get a copy of the book when we walk by. They can get it anywhere books are sold. And then, as Sandy generously mentioned, if you read the book and it resonates with you, I appreciate your review on Amazon, Goodreads, whatever your favorite rating platform is. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I'm also pretty accessible. I'm on social media, Kevin F. Adler, Instagram and Twitter and whatnot. So would love to hear your thoughts on what resonates for you with this work, what you took away from the book. So feel free to follow me, reach out. And if you're interested in getting involved in this issue and want to help through Miracle Messages, we're always looking for new volunteers. So you can sign up at miraclemessages.org and sign up as a phone buddy or as a digital detective. So
Thanks, Kevin, so much.
thanks, Sandy.
And thank you, the listeners, for being with us today. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please like, subscribe, and rate this podcast on all of your favorite platforms. And remember, no matter who you are, you too can beat the big guys. Okay, Kevin, stay with me.